Good morning everyone, my name is Michelle, I hope you're doing well. Welcome to another video. It is Sunday morning, the 8th of September, is it? I think it's the 8th. Yeah, it's a few days since I've done a recorded video. I've been doing lots and lots of live streams on various cases, so go and check them out if you miss them all. They're all in my live streams playlist, or you can just go to live on the channel homepage and they're all there. So I want to talk about the Delphi case today. I did a live stream on this the other day. Not everybody watches live streams. I want to make this more concise and to the point. The point is this: what defence does Richard Allen have left after Frances, the judge, has ordered the defence not to talk anything to do with their intended defence, which is one of third-party culpability? The Odinists. Not allowed. So what's left? What's left for Richard Allen? Is this a lost cause, or is there still a chance that his defence can successfully defend him? Let's look into it.
It's time for you guys to start being journalists.
Before an angry Andrew Baldwin left the courthouse, 13 News overheard him speaking to Richard Allen's wife, saying, "It ain't over. The world's watching. The world sees what's going on."
This topic has been rumbling on since April, when Slick Nick McLelland, the prosecutor, posted a motion in limine, wanting to limit what the defence could talk about. 12 things. Some of these are just really, really silly, like, you can't call me names. Oh, you can't give personal opinion. You can't use any innuendo or inference not supported by admissible evidence. Right, okay. We're all right so far. Any attempt to indoctrinate the jury. Right. Any attempt to have the jury prejudge the credibility of a witness. Any hypothetical questions that include facts that are not in evidence. The biggie is number 7. We'll come back to that. Actually, there's one that arguably is bigger, but we'll come back to 8 as well because it's related to 7. We'll come back to 9 because, in my opinion, that's the most important. Any reference to any prior bad acts of any witnesses that plan to testify. That might be the suicide companions. I'm imagining that the prosecution are going to put on the stand some of the inmates who act as suicide companions, part of the Plus program or something, and they basically sit outside people's cells who it's feared might take their own life and just observe them. And this is what happened to Richard Allen at Westville. They had these companions sitting outside his cell, recording all of his confessions when he was psychotic. So I'm assuming that Nick doesn't want the defence to say, well, what are you in prison for? You're a bad guy, so how can we believe you? I'm guessing that's along those lines. Any references to how the files were labelled? So Nick doesn't want the jury to know how badly organised he was. Some of these are just really, really silly. Any reference to any PowerPoints provided by the state as executive briefs involving any person or persons who were investigated by law enforcement like previously. All right. So let's go back to number 7. That's the Odinists. So they're not allowed to speak about anything to do with their intended third-party culpability defence. Ordinism, cult or ritualistic killing, Brad Holder, Patrick Westfall, Johnny Messer, Elvis Fields, Ned Smith, Rod Abrams. So all the Odinists that were named in the Franks motion. And then Kegan Klein, Jerry Klein, Kegan's just a liar, and then Ron Logan, which is bizarre, because the girls were found on Ron Logan's land. They can't even mention that. And then any reference to the investigation conducted by Top Click, which was into the Odinists. What about Murphy? Is he allowed to testify? I don't know, maybe they could use code words. The most important one, in my opinion, is number 9. Any reference to geofencing and or any testimony that Kevin Horan about geofencing or the findings from any geofence search that is not relevant or is for the purpose of confusing issues. Isn't that what the defence are meant to do? Isn't that part of developing reasonable doubt? I don't know, but has the potential to mislead the jury in violation of Rule 401. All right. Geofencing. Well, according to a report by Kevin Horan, which is in the discovery, this is the prosecution's own work, there were other phones in the vicinity of the crime scene on the afternoon of February 13th, 2017. Right close within metres of the crime scene. Was Richard Allen's one of those phones? We have to ask that question. But the defence are not to talk about it. Paragraphs 8 through 12. All of it, she's granted. But it's not just the defence that are not allowed to talk about it. It's also the prosecution. If the prosecution brings it up, it opens the door. And then the defence can talk about it to the heart's content. So clearly Nick isn't going to use the geofencing data. So Richard Allen's phone seemingly wasn't in the vicinity of the crime scene at the very time when the girls were murdered, which is the first problem for the prosecution. You might say, well, maybe he turned his phone off. All right, well, was it there at any time? Was it there at any time in the day of February 13th? Was it there earlier, for example? So this is all of the things that defence are not allowed to talk about. So what's left? What can the defence do to defend Richard Allen? What can they do? Well, in my opinion, the number one thing, the most important thing that they could do is attack the timeline, because the timeline is crucial. You know me, if you've watched my videos for any length of time, you'll know I love a good timeline. A case hinges on its timeline. If the timeline doesn't make sense, then we've got a big problem. This is a probable cause affidavit. This was written by then Detective Tony Liggett, who is now the sheriff. So Richard Allen does admit to being there that day. Within days of the crime being committed, Richard Allen went to the cops. He spoke to Dan Dullard. Dan Dullard, who didn't record, said he recorded them all, but didn't record Richard Allen's, but he'll keep looking. Right. He did make a note that he found Mr. Allen was on the trail. Actually, he didn't say Mr. Allen. He said Whiteman, because in the system it was recorded as Richard Allen Whiteman. Where's Whiteman come from? Well, that's Richard Allen's address. All right, so Mr. Allen was on the trail between 1:30 and 3:30, the very time when the girls were murdered. Kelsey, Libby's sister, dropped them off at just before 1:49. Kelsey's car was seen driving away on the Hoosier Harvey store camera at 1:49. So just before 1:49, the girls were dropped off. Right. According to Nick, the girls were murdered between 2:32 and 3:30. How do we know that? Well, it's not through an autopsy report, because there's no time of death. No time of death recorded. So what information is Nick basing his ideas on here? Well, it's from Libby's phone. According to First Sergeant Cecil, speaking at the recent hearings, 3-day hearings, Libby's health data on her Apple iPhone 6, I believe, stopped recording steps at 2:32 p.m. So that phone didn't move after that. And then witness Sarah Carbo saw a bloody and muddy man wearing a blue coat walking west on County Road North, heading towards the old CPS building where they say Richard Allen's black Ford Focus was parked, even though no witness said that they saw a black Ford Focus. Actually, nobody even saw a black car. But a black car similar to a Ford Focus was seen just before 1:30 driving on County Road North. Again, using a Harvester camera. But nobody saw that car. One witness said it was a smart car or a purple PT Cruiser. Betsy Blair, who saw a man on Morden High Bridge around 2 p.m. in his 20s with poofy hair. This is Betsy Blair's sketch. But they're saying that this older sketch, which is an amalgamation of Sarah Carbo's information and that of other witnesses that was released shortly after the murders, they say that's Richard Allen, but they also say that this is Richard Allen too, because that's what Betsy Blair saw. However, in 2019, when they released this second sketch, it's very unclear whether the Indiana State Police believe that this is two people, like two suspects, because they said they no longer were interested in the older sketch. This was the man, this was the guy, this was Bridge Guy. So when was Richard Allen actually at the trails? Was it between 1:30 and 3:30? No, left the scene at 3:30, having murdered the girls. They can't talk about the runes, can't talk about the F tree or the upside down L tree, whatever. Can't talk about that. 3:57, this muddy and bloody man walking west on County Road North. Although Sarah Carbo never said he was bloody. That was just made up by Tony Liggett, apparently. But Richard Allen, yeah, said he was there. Said he was there wearing similar clothes to that of Bridge Guy. Bridge Guy video confirmed to be 2:13 into 2:14. Again, Cecil said this at the recent hearings. But Richard Allen, in October 2022, when he was arrested, when Jerry Holman interviewed him and arrested him, without reading him his Miranda rights, possibly, he said he actually left about 1:30. He was there between about 12 and 1:30. So that would be before the girls were murdered. However, that's one word against another, isn't it? But it's a problem for the prosecution because they've actually got no real evidence of what Richard Allen said in 2017. They've got Dan Dollard's note. Okay. But we haven't actually got this in Rick's own words. It's up to the jury who they believe. We've also got inconsistent statements by witnesses. We've got inconsistent descriptions of the vehicle. Actually, Richard Allen never even mentioned the CPS. He said he parked at the old Farm Bureau building, which is in town, not on County Road North, but hey. But the real issue is the time of death. No recorded time of death. Surely they could give an approximate time. Didn't take the girls' temperatures, though. What about the degree of rigor mortis? No? All right. So, no time of death. So, Nick has to rely on the health data from Libby's phone. But, you know, if you turned the phone off and transported it in a vehicle and then brought it back at, say, let's say 4:33 a.m., wouldn't record any steps. Wouldn't record any steps. No. Okay. So what's the big problem? The big problem is Libby's phone. You might say, well, it's a big problem for the defence because it didn't record any steps. But again, turn it off, transport it anywhere you want. It's not going to record any steps, is it? They also didn't measure the amount of steps. How many steps is it across the bridge? How many steps is it over the creek? Or how many steps is it to the private driveway that's on the south side where they could have been bungled into a car and taken anywhere and then brought back at some point and then murdered? Are there any witnesses that walked that route down the side of the creek? That'd be something I'd be trying to find out if I was the defence, because the search parties were there from like 4 p.m. when Libby's dad, Derek, raised the alarm. There was loads of people out searching all through that evening. Not all night, but all through that evening. Did anybody walk that way? I'd want to know. One search party walked that way and the girls weren't there. Well, they weren't there the whole time, were they? But what about Libby's phone? Well, there was no activity at all on Libby's phone. Didn't connect with the cell tower until 4:33 a.m. on the morning of February 14th. And then 14 messages came through all at once. Second after second after second, all at 4:33. How is that possible? Unless someone turned that phone on. Something made that phone react at 4:33 a.m. If the girls had been killed between 2:32 and 3:30, who turned that phone on at 4:33 a.m. for all those messages to come through? There's no other explanation that I can think of. None. None. So did Richard Allen sneak back to turn the phone on at 4:30? No. The phone was found under one of the girls. Turned the phone on, slumped the girls' bodies down there, and the killer knows that those girls are going to be found. Because they just tracked the phone. Was that Richard Allen? Well, how were the prosecution going to prove that Richard Allen was there? How were they going to get over all of these obstacles? That's the defence that's left. Richard Allen has a fighting chance here. Prosecution's case is weak. Oh, but what about the magic bullet, I hear you say? Well, we'll let the ballistics experts fight over that one, won't we? But attack the timeline. There's your reasonable doubt. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye, guys.